Hi everyone, welcome. Over here in this bin of, well, technically it's castings anymore, because in my mind I've pretty much treated this as a depopulated bin of worm castings at this point, but I guess what transformed out of a depopulated batch of worm castings was what I thought to be maybe a cocoon nursery. I think I spotted some cocoons along the way. I thought that if we let this stuff sit a little while, maybe we'd start seeing some babies emerge. Maybe we'd have a chance to round them up. So it's been sitting here for 20 days like this, just allowing time for that to happen. It did seem like one final effort to try to get babies out of here, assuming there were any cocoons if I wasn't imagining, and trying to do one final haul out of the left behind babies and their cocoons from that system before we can bless that as a completed system and we could really truly harvest the castings and put them to work somewhere, feed a plant with them. So the systems that got launched 4 weeks ago, 2 systems, they're out here on my bench already. We're all set to feed them. Trying a little something different. I figured I would just slide the camera over after we got done feeding the first system. So why don't we zero in on our work here and get these little guys fed. So what we did over in the bait boxes is what I want to do here too. If you looked closely, you might have noticed how I had wrapped the food into little paper bundles. So what you saw inside those bait traps was the same thing that I'm making here for these systems. Very similar to what we did last check-in. We fed the systems last time too using little burrito wrapped food portions. For a while I was trying to get myself accustomed to being a little bit more generous with bedding in my worm bin feedings, and I started feeding this way with the little burrito wrap style to really try to force the addition of some carbon, some bedding every go around. So for a while there I was really just using the method as a way to sort of get myself accustomed to accounting for their bedding needs, not just their food needs. So that was the nice thing about feeding this way, by delivering the food with some bedding type material right off the bat. This was the way that I wrapped up each of these little food portions for the bait boxes, and this is how we're going to feed these 2 systems too. So we'll just let's see about sharing a little bit more green over there, right? And maybe not so green. Alright, so yeah, nothing too fancy. This is the exact same thing that we did last time when we fed these bins. We wrapped up a couple little food portions, dropped them down into a hole, and that was 10 days ago, so I'll be curious to see how they're doing on what they were fed last time. I don't remember the ingredients, but they were delivered in this same fashion in little paper bundles. I'm just setting them off to the side so that we give ourselves a little bit of room to work here. Once we make a space to drop these in, we'll bring them back into action. 2 will be used to feed here, and the other 2 will be used to feed the other system. Let's get things uncovered here. Now, I do have, in addition to the food bundles, a little bit of coffee, which means we're also coming in with a replacement feeding zone indicator. And that's what this coffee filter was attempting to do right here, was just show us where the last feeding was. I mean, for that matter, besides new feeding zone indicators, I've also got nice new top coverings as well. So all kinds of new top coverings. So I think anything we spot along the way, like these large chunks of paper, previously the top covering newspaper, I think will all come into play here as very good supplemental bedding to include down in the feeding area with our little bedding bundle food portions. So 10 days, I'm curious to see what things look like. It's hard to imagine that there'd be anything left of the paper that made up the bundles, because the worms obviously have to get right past that to get at the food items. So that stuff probably just gets gobbled up right away as the worms just try to get in at the food. And the moisture, I think, is pretty much the only leftovers. So I think what I just cracked in half there in my fingers was a piece of potato peel. I don't know if that would have been part of the last feeding. There was the last feeding 10 days ago, and 10 days prior to that the system had received its first feeding. So days 1 through 8 were just letting the worms loose into the bedding without any food, and then coming in on day 8 to give them their first feeding, and then coming back on day 18 to give them their second feeding. Today, 10 days later, day 28, we're giving them some more food bundles. So I don't know, is this part of a food bundle? I suppose it could be. Or maybe it's just a piece of top covering that I missed along the way. I don't know for sure, but it's all good. I like the way things look here. I'm glad about the moisture. The moisture seems nice. And hopefully these little bundles, I could already feel the pumpkin starting to melt. So I think those bundles are going to bring with themselves sort of a net positive as far as moisture complement, because you got to admit, the paper that the nice juicy pumpkin and cabbage is stuffed in is coming in here dry, but within moments it's already soaking in the juices of the thawing foods. It'll get soaked from the neighboring materials as we backfill the holes. So I think that paper can ultimately just be considered as just not causing any drying of the feeding area. So all these things that we sort of collected up in the beginning, all these large chunks of paper and cardboard, a lot of it appeared to just be leftovers of the feeding zone indicators and the old top coverings. I think we've now integrated all that stuff down into the feeding area too. Oh geez, we've already almost covered up the feeding area, and we've not even brought in the final little portion here. Because besides the coffee going in, I'd also like to sprinkle a little bit of grit down into the feeding area. And then the other thing that I often include with the coffee is a little bit of worm chow too. Sprinkle some of that down in there. Now we're good to go. Now we can cover up. Alright, I think things are pretty level here. Things have nice moisture right down the middle where we've been feeding. I just want to sort of verify that same goes for the outside edges. Alright. Nice 4-week-old systems. Coming along good. Good moisture level down there. That's what I was hoping for. So I think we're good to go here. Coming back on with some nice new stuff. This nice new feeding zone indicator, nice new top covering. And then bringing the plastic covering back is going to enable the majority of the moisture that already exists in here to remain in here and start recirculating under the plastic. Getting everything nice and damp and cozy. And now we can get on to bin number 2. So here we've already got ourselves the little food bundles all set to go. Let's just set them aside. Once again, give ourselves a little room to work. Now I sometimes have a tendency to pick up the pace a little bit when I'm feeding multiple bins, because if I'm running them in sync with each other, as I've been doing with these two systems over the past month that they've been in service, I sort of expect, or feel like I know what to expect once I get to the the follow-on bin or follow-on bins, whatever the case may be. Not a lot of reason to think there'd be a great deal of deviation, although in early stages of a bin's life, it is good to be a little bit cautious just to make sure nothing's getting away from you or nothing's out of control. But as long as the moisture's all good and there's plenty of bedding, that's the majority of what these little guys need, and you're probably in good shape. So there we go. I'm just wondering, does anyone recall what the population count was in these systems? You'll remember the last time we were noticing how that last haul out of 120 worms, the previous go-around, appeared to be just the amount that we needed to almost bring the populations into sync. So the system that we assumed to have the lower population got that transplant of baited worms loaded into it, and then we later even did a little exchange student swap to get a a few extra worms over into the other bin, and then there we go. And then we came to a point where we assumed that both systems have exactly the same number of worms living in them. Whether that's true or not, I do not know, but you know what? Let me just reaching over to grab some of the things that are so far away now. Usually everything's like right there, but having these two bins side by side, occupying this much space here on the counter, gotta like reach over to get stuff. But we're pretty much attempting to do the same thing, you know, keep these things in sync with one another for the most part if we can, and this will allow us to almost treat the two as a single item, you know, come in here with the knowledge that they're going to be consistent, they need the same things, and then we can sort of provide them with a somewhat more mass-produced solution than needing to cater to, you know, any one particular bin's individual requirements, you know. So there we go. I think we're in pretty good shape. I think we could just cover up. Once again, it's probably a good idea just to make sure that nothing exhibits dryness at this point. If it did, it would probably be a good idea to account for that and compensate, but so far everything seems to have a good moisture content to it. Worms in all of it, as far as I could tell, little pockets where there's more worms. And in general, I would say systems that are looking quite nice, so way to go. Alright, could this be leftovers of a previous feeding, including the burrito bag, or a burrito newspaper? I believe it is. Very cool. We must have just unearthed that at some point earlier and not even noticed. Well, these new bins, you know, with all this bedding and all these light colored materials, it's like everything's sort of camouflaged. Makes it a little bit trickier to spot things that would otherwise be easier to see. Alright, did I make these the right size? I believe I did. Oh boy, look at all this stuff on my glove. Let's see about leaving some of it back here instead of it ending over in the sink. This is the proper place for it. All this dampness and moisture and goodness. So besides that, I got a few other things I got to take care of, putting away and cleaning up. I'm not going to keep you around for that. Before I go really quick, let me just say thank you. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. Alright everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.